I'm Fee O'Brien, and this is the Hopecast from Library of Hope. We're building a living archive of people, ideas, and experiments that show how the future can be shaped with care, creativity, and a whole lot of imagination. This podcast is where we dig into that idea. We're chatting to artists, thinkers, and doers who are reimagining how life could feel, look, or work differently. I'm joined, as always, by the legend that is Helen Trickey, and today we're talking to the amazing Aaran Sian, a London-based artist, designer, and community organizer. Aaran's practice explores speculative futures through queer and trans South Asian stories. They work across art, design, publishing, and collectives, creating spaces where voices that are too often erased are instead centered and celebrated. Their projects range from exhibitions to collaborative platforms, always rooted in community and in the belief that creativity can be a tool for belonging, visibility, and change. Well, let's get into it. Hello, Aaran. Welcome to the Hopecast. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. So nice to be here and to be talking to you.
Just to start us off, Aaran, can you tell us a little bit about you and your work and how you show up in the world?
Yeah, so my work is all about, I'd say, envisioning speculative futures based on queer and trans people of color. So like our narratives and stories. A lot of the work that I do is very community rooted. So it's rarely just me in this room, like, working behind the scenes. Like there's always involvement with people. It's very much about like community connections. And I think especially because so much of it is about like world building and thinking about, I guess, visions for the future, thinking about queer and trans people of color, like our stories, histories, narratives. And I think themes like that have to be done in a collective way. Like it's not something that can be done in a silo. The second part of that question where I think you said, how does your work show up in the world right now? That, to me, like that question really makes me think. I think because I guess I say my work is about speculative futures, but it's so much based on, it's so generational. Like it's work that's constantly being done and has been being done and is being enacted by so many other people in the world right now, but also has done it in the past and will do in the future. So I'd say I feel like right now it feels like urgent dreaming in a way, but I think it's always going to feel like that.
Urgent dreaming. I love that.
Yeah.
How did you even get into urgent dreaming and speculative futures?
I think dreaming is a radical act in itself, especially when you do have identities that are marginalized. So I think especially for like queer and trans people of color, to dream is such a radical act because it's something that was never meant to happen under society, under colonialism. I think especially being queer and trans and a person of color, those were identities that were completely erased, just completely erased. So I think to have those identities and to dream centering those stories and identities is I guess this kind of like radical thing which envisions like new futures that are like built on so much joy, built on so much hope. Also, I guess do come from pain and suppression and oppression. I think that's where the urgentness comes from. And especially right now when the world can feel like it's crumbling and there's so much like weaponizing of trans people, of queer people, of people of color, and like there has done in the past. But I think right now in particular, it's always urgent. So I think that's why it's always urgent and it's always dreaming.
I've never was brought up to dream. So my family was not a dreaming family. And this is something I've learned about as I've got older. Like, what is it to even, like, dreaming almost was a bit woo-woo. And like, why would you spend your time on that when you can get things done today and get your head down? And then you add to it urgency, which doesn't feel like a easy condition to dream in because there's a sense of like fight or flight, right? Like, how do you make space to dream? And does it come naturally to you, or is it something you've trained yourself in?
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about, especially the urgent part, because I think the fact that it is urgent is like it has to be done. Like there's almost no other way. There's no other way to be. To me, it feels like you dream or you crumble or you fall. So it kind of has to happen. Like we have to. But in a way, we kind of do to survive. And I think that dreaming is such a huge part of community and community care. It's like dreaming for each other. I hear what you're saying about dreaming feeling like this woo-woo kind of concept, but I guess it's also not. I think it's so grounded and rooted in reality. And I think especially when you're queer or trans, like dreaming does become part of you. Maybe you grow up dreaming of like how things could be or how you want things to be because you're kind of told that it can't be like that. So I think there's always this concept of dreaming. I think especially then through like creativity and doing that together with other people and collectively bringing that out, dreaming touches on so many different concepts as well of different parts of identities that were suppressed. I think it brings it all together.
Do you think that maybe dreaming essentially, does it equate to hope? Like, is it the hope rather than dreaming as such, but is it the hopefulness?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think dreaming and hope are basically the same thing, but so is resistance at the same time. I think in terms of like all social movements or like revolutions, they always start from having to resist, but also being hopeful of a future and also knowing that you deserve better and knowing that things can be better and they should be better. And I think that there's a lot of hope in that. I think you have to have a lot of hope to be able to live that and to embody that and then share that as well.
Definitely. So what does hope feel like for you? Not necessarily conceptually, but in a like real life lived in kind of way. How does it show up in your creativity, and how do you move through it yourself?
I think for me, it goes back to community and friendships. I think that's where hope kind of flies and thrives. Whenever you maybe even just like see yourself reflected through someone else who just understands what you're going through, understands the lived experience that you have, and you're able to see each other. I think there's so much hope in that because it's kind of saying, okay, no, you understand what it's like, and maybe things can change, or there's ways things can change. And I think seeing so many self-made infrastructures by queer and trans people and queer and trans people of color, that's so hopeful as well, to be like, there are groups and people and collectives on the ground who are investing so much in community care because society isn't doing that, or mainstream society isn't doing that. And that as well that to me is so hopeful, because these things are constantly being made, even if like there's no funding or even when there's no money. It's still, people are like pouring their energy into these self-made infrastructures that are on the ground. And I think that's a huge part of hope showing up in everyday life. When you are non-binary or trans, the way that you move about the world can feel very polarizing at times. There can be this feeling of experiencing violence and oppression, but then experiencing immense like joy when you do find a space that is full of care. And I think,
Extremes.
yeah, so many extremes, and it can happen just from a journey down the street. But when you're maybe with somebody who understands that, that is a small pocket of hope. Or when you do then travel to a space where you do feel seen and embodied and safe, is also hope as well. So it's almost like pockets of hope that are amongst the very scary, real, violent experiences as well.
I've got a couple of friends, and we were talking about when the going gets tough, it's very easy to become insular and cut yourself off from the
Yeah.
world. But what would you say to people who that's their first reaction, especially as trans people, people of color, non-binary people,
Yeah.
and others who are facing challenges and violence in the world, like going inwards, and that feeling of wanting to go inwards feels very natural. Like, again, fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
What would be your suggestions, your ideas on what to do in that situation?
So this actually came from a friend of mine and also a housemate who said to me, and this is what I do now. Whenever you feel like that, I think it's important to remember that that's how society wants you to feel, to be cut off and isolated. Because sadly, like we do live in a society that's built on hierarchies and domination and legacies of colonialism, which was a literal stealing of people's bodies and lands. And I think those reactions are sometimes like inherent in us, like wanting to then go inwards and wanting to almost like cut ourselves off from people and cut ourselves off from community. So I feel like in those situations, the thing to do is lean into community and lean into people, because there are always people who do understand. There is always space for you in the world, even when it feels like there's not. And there's a reason why you feel like there's not. And I think that's the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're leaning into the thing that is hurting you, essentially. Yeah, it's a scary place to be.
Yeah, definitely. And leaning into the systemic issues that are wanting to hurt you. It's not an easy thing to do, to be able to just snap out of that. And that's like not what I'm saying at all, but I think definitely leaning into community.
Yeah, community definitely comes across in every podcast, no matter who we're talking to and
It's
where
the
they're.
red thread.
Yeah, it is 100% the thread, and it's obviously incredibly important in this time that we have now to create those smaller communities that we can all thrive in. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the communities that you're part of, or that you see thriving and that you see making a massive difference in showing hope to others?
Yeah, definitely. I think community's been like a huge part of my journey and life. I think I wouldn't really be who I am without community, even in terms of my own identity and knowing who I am and being able to express all of that. That was something that was born out of community and being able to see that reflected in other people. Because I think that's so important, especially when you do have identities that are basically hidden or suppressed, and being able to find communities where people are flipping that narrative and centering different identities and different experiences and saying like, no, like it's okay. You know, these are all identities that exist. These are the histories behind them. This is a book that I found that's based off that. You should read that because you wouldn't find this in a library. Or here's a piece of clothing that I think you should wear because it feels like you and it feels like your gender, it feels like your identity, and maybe you won't be able to go into a shop and get that yourself. Even those small infrastructures of care that are built in communities that are so important. And for me, I've sought that out in a lot of my living situations. I was living in a BIPOC only collective, and that was in Copenhagen. And I guess it's funny I say this. I'm saying the first time that I'm around like all people of color, but obviously I grew up in a house which was like my family are obviously people of color. But I mean, I guess it's different when there's like an intention behind it. And when you maybe are in a city where there is a lot of white supremacy and a lot of like systemic injustice around people of color and queer people. So I think living in those situations or those places is also where you find community. And since then is I've always found community in living situations, and I've always lived with either all queer people of color. Right now it's like an all trans household, and those spaces are life saving. And then outside of home environments, it's all of the creative communities, especially the ones that are rooted in identities. Like there's Daga, which is a South Asian visual arts collective that I'm part of and I do a lot of work with. And I think having those like kind of anchor communities are so important to be able to connect and to share and to know that your identities can be centered and you can bring ideas into that maybe you can't in other spaces.
Yeah.
There's a concept I grapple with a lot, which is freedom and safety at the same time. And how do you create the conditions to help people live their most free lives and feel their freest, and at the same time their safest? Because those two things often don't feel consistent with each other. And what you're talking about makes me think about that again, like this feeling of being able to explore together, being able to, especially as it relates to creativity, right, like express differently and just understand the world differently. And at the same time you've got a real kind of foundation of safety because you understand each other, which I love. Like there's so much power in that freedom and safety coming together and being able to explore as a community. I just think these spaces just need to be everywhere.
Yeah,
Definitely.
It'll bring out so much in people. The whole of humanity needs safety and freedom. And we're really not doing it very well at the moment, I would say, in many places.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel really inspired that you're being able to find the communities that can do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think with freedom and safety and that idea of everyone needing that and everyone needing that right now, I also feel like it's also about needing to be supported as well. Because I think within that, there is, again, a lot of pain in that. There's a lot of trauma, and people aren't always ready to deal with that or to be able to know how to deal with that. And even as a community, everyone rallies together, but it's always because there's a lack of support outside of that. So it's almost if these communities were more supported properly and truly, then in the whole entirety, including freedom and also being truly safe as well. That's so important too.
Yeah, it's huge.
As being part of these incredible communities, what has it unlocked in you? You know, has it unlocked something within you that's changed how you then hold space for others?
I think definitely. I think it's just the kind of thing about knowing how important those spaces are means that I truly see the importance in holding space for others. And because I think with holding space to me, it's not like creating the space or because the space already exists. I like to use the word soft scaffolding in those holding space moments, especially when it comes to creativity, because it's like providing, yeah, I guess providing the space or providing the tools and the discussion, but then it always will just go as it wants to go because people always come with who they are, whatever they're feeling, whether that's pain, joy, quietness, wanting to be in the corner, wanting to be involved. All of those things can exist. And I think that's what I have learned or unlocked the most, that there needs to be space for complexity of different people and emotions. And that's always going to be okay.
I love that term of soft scaffolding. That just sums it up. How you feel when you're kind of holding a space for others. You're an intrinsic part of it. Everything will sort of develop naturally and organically around just having that soft scaffolding holding everything up. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Your work centers around queer, brown, and globally connected stories, the ones that are normally often excluded and erased. But what becomes possible when those stories are made visible, and especially through collective or creative processes?
I think when those stories become visible and celebrated and honored, there's this deep belonging and deep joy, and also definitely hope as well. But I think deep belonging is something that I see and feel in those spaces. And I see that with from talking to other people in those moments of whether it's an exhibition or a community art project, being part of that process and taking others along that process. It's this sense of being involved and knowing you're like an intrinsic part of it and then seeing that all come together visually. I think just seeing representation and knowing that it came from you and came from the people around you and came from your community, it gives this sense of deep belonging because a lot of the time we don't have that. Like it kind of locates people, it locates you and it says that I am part of this space and I am part of the earth and this universe and this ecosystem. I think it's very rooting.
Gives you something to tether to, right? And to actually
Yeah.
respond to. Have you always used creativity and being creative as your route to expression and to rooting yourself personally, or is this something you've learned over time? Because it's such a journey, right? Like, is this always been part of who you are, and it's just been able to flourish in recent years, or it's something you've learned?
Say it's always been part of me. It feels like so natural. It's felt very organic as well. The way everything has evolved. I use it to anchor myself definitely whenever I'm feeling not okay or when I'm feeling ungrounded in any way. I will turn to creativity, even if that's just looking at past projects or artwork or just drawing. Like I think it grounds me and grounds who I am into something and into an and I think especially because a lot of being queer can feel like you're either hyper visible or hyper invisible. There's this like duality of those two things.
Yeah.
And I think that can, for me, sometimes when those two things clash together, it creates this feeling of like association and feeling like I'm floating and a person in a way. And then creativity is like, no, these are all the parts of you that exist and you do have a voice, you do have an expression. This is work that puts a queer trans brown character at the center and all of our stories and envisions a world that's already being enacted, visualizes that in like a speculative way. And that to me is so anchoring. And maybe to others as well, because I guess it's all a form of like visual justice. Like we don't really tend to see visions of worlds that center queer, brown, trans people, where like queer, brown, trans people are at the center or like embedded in the world and doing powerful things in artwork.
So you know how Batman, the signal goes up and there's a bat in the sky. That feeling of this is the signal. Like it's putting something out there so people can actually come to you. I love again how your creativity, but even how you actually create and what you create. It feels like a bat signal out there that's saying, look at this is possible. There's a kind of safety in it and like a way to identify within it, especially for queer brown people, which I love. It takes a lot of guts to be the person that's putting the bat signal out there. It's huge to be able to do that, especially for other people as well as yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I haven't heard it reflected back at me like that. I think definitely like it becomes an anchor for others. And I think that really is a main part of it as well. These are stories and this is real and what you experience is valid and it can also be so much more. And there is so much magic and power in who we are as people, especially as trans people, as queer, brown, trans people, all of those identities. so much magic and power and history and lineage. And I think that's something that I want people to see and feel seen and powerful and not minimized in any way. And knowing that even though there's a lot of pain, it can be alchemized into power.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's what I do a lot. I think that's a lot of my process is alchemizing pain into power.
What an amazing way to live your life. You said something that really hit me where you said about being hyper invisible and hyper visible at the same time. And that's a lot of energy. The energy it takes to live in that identity is like hardcore. How do you protect your energy and know where to put your energy? Is it about creativity and that's the thing you go to, or how much intentionality do you have to live in that identity?
It can be difficult. It's been a long process of also trying to find ways to feel grounded. And again, community comes into that so much. I think, again, like feeling seen and reflected by the people around you is so important, but also in yourself, knowing all the different strands. That's also why I talk about or explore in my work queer lineage and ancestry and pre-colonial stories and histories of queerness and gender fluidity that have always existed, and knowing that your queer or trans ancestors know exactly what it is that you're going through because they've all been through it as well. That is so grounding to me. And I think, again, it locates my identity and my root into something much bigger, to know that it's a shared experience and it's part of something bigger. This all shows up in my work, and especially things like nature. I think nature is a way to ground yourself, and trans people and queer people and nature are the same thing, and you can learn so much from nature and like the way nature creates different ecosystems and thrives in hostile environments, blooms, and also like dies and decays. And the way like trees are so rooted and ancient is also, to me, like being queer is so similar. It's is so ancient, especially being queer and a person of color. Like it's always existed since the beginning of time.
You're part of a timeless story in that sense. It's your part in it, which again, finding who you are in that story. Do you feel a responsibility to that? Or is it that's too big a thing to think about? And actually this is about protecting your journey. Your role and your legacy builds on other people's. Then there's a community that takes that on. Do you think about your role from a legacy perspective?
I'm not sure if I fully have in terms of legacy perspective, because I think in a way I see it as part of an ecosystem, and probably an ecosystem that's always being built and has had so much history as well. And I guess I'm just helping to carry a part of it until I don't, and then other people will continue carrying that as long as everyone needs to.
I think your view and your outlook on how we all work as humans is so enlightened, and I feel better about things, even though my situation is completely different. And I just feel enlightened by your view and your take on how we can go forward as communities, as people, as humans. You've spoken about the importance of reclaiming the past in order to, especially as far as a colonial history is concerned, that to be able to build and create a more liberated future and more hopeful future. Could you talk a little bit about your view on that?
Yeah, so the importance of reclaiming the past is because I think in our current situation, so much of it is because of colonialism and domination and hierarchies and systems that were enforced to divide us or to suppress us, to enslave us, to kill us. Like all of that stuff is the legacies we all still experience right now. And obviously I was not part of the world before colonialism. I don't know what that was truly like, but I think the fact that it's the fact that there was so many stories that were lost, bringing that into the future is so important because, again, oppression and suppression is so much part of these marginalized identities of being queer and trans and a person of color. And there's a lot of power in reclaiming that because it was never meant to happen. I think the idea of the world was, this is what we're going to do. We're going to dominate these lands, take these people away from their histories, and then we'll have the power. So then there's so much power to then go back and say, no, that yes, that happened, but things can still change or things can still get better from reclaiming that. Being queer and trans and a person of color is so anti-colonial because of that, because it was an identity that was never meant to exist in so many ways. So it's like inherently anti-colonial. It can show visions of what an anti-colonial future could be if those stories weren't suppressed, and if we built on them today, what could that look like? And I think that's where thinking about things in a more liberated lens comes from.
It does feel like the world has definitely got more intense. It feels like it's got to a level of intensity that I haven't seen before. And at the same time, change is happening quickly in lots of different places. And we're more educated, we have more access to information, there's more ability to connect with each other, and at the same time be more isolated. Like there's almost like the extremes are happening in so many different ways. And it makes me wonder, when you talk about colonialism, the Industrial Revolution and people actually going out is a relatively new concept in the sense of the last 200, 300 years. And what was happening before that which was a lifetime of years before that. And then what is it now? People are starting to talk about what is this next era, and it feels like we're in the eye of the storm in terms of the change forming the next era. And there's so many forces trying to pull it in different directions, but it's no longer the Industrial Revolution years in the sense of the factories. Now we have AI, and now we have all these other different forces, and it feels so important to ensure that this next round of change doesn't repeat the mistakes. And I know that this is not a new concept, people are talking about this a lot, but it doesn't repeat the mistakes of 200 years ago or 300 years ago. Because we have so much information at our hands, we have an ability to put the bat signal up there. And so it feels huge talking to you at this moment in time as well, because of that, because of the context we're in. But it's kind of mind-blowing, like what the possibilities could end up being within our lifetimes, and then shortly thereafter as well. Like it's big. It feels big.
It does feel so global rather than just in these little pockets or in certain countries. Like we're all working together in the eye of the storm. So with that enormity of it, it makes it feel even more possible. I don't know, that sounds like a weird thing to say, but I feel like because it's so massive, like it's got to shift. Something has to shift. And just having that sort of traction behind everything and this enormity and people moving in their own little pockets, but yet coming together somehow in this sort of almost feels a bit underground, Mad Maxy kind of craziness, but like in a brilliant, crazy, positive way, I think, even though there's horrific stuff happening and, you know, the world is like very messy at the moment.
I've been doing a piece of work on hate and harassment. And one of the themes that have come up is scarcity mindset, like protecting, because it feels like you're going to take something from me. But in duality with that, there's also this feeling of otherness, because I don't know you, I don't understand you, and therefore you might take something from me. And I think the media doesn't help with that. But as it comes to this feeling of other people and people who aren't like me, what is the unlock to connection there? And this is a big question. I'm not expecting us to walk away from this podcast, be like, we smashed it, guys, we're going to go and head out there and tell everyone. But do you have any thoughts on that in terms of, again, is it creativity and storytelling?
I feel like, to me, what comes to me instinctively is connections. We are like pitted against each other so much in this society. That was also always a tactic of colonialism, to create laws, pit groups against each other, create hatred, and then be able to dominate. To me, the reverse of that is to resist that and to keep connecting and find common connections between all of us, because we all have them. And when different people are given the space to express and be who they are, from genders, sexualities, nationalities, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, then it takes away from the scarcity mindset. Because I think that comes up a lot, where people are kind of saying, oh, well, why is this group getting so many rights and I'm not? I feel like I see that so much, where people are like, oh, well, these people have more rights than us these days, when they're talking about people of color or queer people. And well, it's like, shouldn't we all have the same rights? Or it should be equitable, and it shouldn't be one for the other, or like one in, one out. I think it's like equity and connection. Yeah. Those are the two components to me that I think are missing and also important. And I think, I'll always advocate for creativity as being such a tool in creating connections and showing new systems of how power can be redistributed, or how people can come together and learn about one another and be involved in that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this needs creativity to unlock options and opportunities and possibilities. And I feel like we're limiting ourselves as humanity. Come on, we're smart. We're not stupid people. And also now we have AI. So like between us, there's got to be an opportunity here to be smarter with this. It's innovation, it's creativity, exploration, and having the conditions to actually try things out.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying, because we've got it in us. We've got it in us to try different ways of doing this. And
Definitely.
that's the reason why Library of Hope exists, because it came from, well, there's got to be better options than this. And there's
Yeah.
loads all over the world, but they're not in one particular place. And that's really important, I think, to us, is to actually try and understand different ways of thinking and the hope that comes from those, and then actually be able to start triangulating and say, wow, there's like, these things sound really exciting, there's definite opportunity here.
But it's also
Yeah.
showing it in a really exciting, cool way.
Yes.
You know what I
yes.
mean? Because that's part of it as well. And that's the creative process, talking into these audiences. Like, there's no point of us all preaching to the converted. We need to
Yeah.
educate others, and we're not going to get through with a really boring statement. It doesn't cut through, and it doesn't resonate with those audiences. You know, we can wax lyrically about this forevermore, but the ones that we need to get through to need to hear it in their language so they can understand it and be educated on it. But it is also going to take creative processes to do that, because we need to cut through in a different way.
If you think about superpowers and using your I'm not really a Batman fan, so I don't know why this is coming out.
It's really coming out today.
I've never watched a Marvel film in my life, so just putting it out there. But in terms of like leaning into the things that are your strengths and superpowers, like, yeah, I suppose I'm a really big advocate for it, and I'd just love to hear your thoughts, both of you. Like, what do you think your superpowers are as individuals, and how do you like to use them?
I'm actually making this visual story, and it's about this trans South Asian character who basically is superhero, and
Yeah.
they have these pair of South Asian earrings called jumkas, and the story is that these jumkas are magic and they're like passed down from their trans ancestors, and it's about how queer people or trans people, especially trans people, have these objects of gender affirming care, and they are these powerful objects that embody their own strength and power. And going back to that thing about queer people being magical and powerful, and this story is about like positioning this character as like the superhero who like liberates all systems. I don't have a pair of magical jumkas, even though I do have them and they're magic to me, but they don't quite do that yet. But my own superpowers, I want to say listening and being able to empathize, and maybe being able to connect dots and be able to visualize and transform stories or alchemize. Yeah, I feel like an alchemist, especially with like transforming
That's your word of the year.
emotions.
Yeah,
I think so.
Nice.
Transforming emotions, experiences into other things.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I love that.
What are your superpowers, Fee?
For me, it's like finding ways of bringing people together in communities. So connecting people together to then create these bigger communities that can do amazing things. And from my past experiences, also being able to voice things in a way that can resonate with people, that can hopefully connect with them. Well, I had a brand which was talking about equity within the coffee industry for women, and there were some hard-hitting facts there, but I like being able to get down and dirty and talk to people in a way that they're going to connect with, and creating connections between people is what I love most in the world. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, amazing.
That's amazing.
That's why you're both on this podcast.
But you also should answer that question.
I love people. That's not a superpower, it's just a fact. In a previous job, I had to do an exercise where you ask people what your gifts are. And the one thing they all came back and said is, you really care. Everybody. And I was like, like, it's cool. Like, I'm into that. It was like, you really care about stuff. And I think that maybe combined with the fact that I feel like we could do so much better. I'm like, come on, guys, this is not good enough. Let's just go again. Let's give it a go. And it's optimism and hope. I want,
And like you've got like a really strong determination,
and I care about it as well. So the combination of those things, I think, are probably quite helpful.
Those are so important, especially caring, empathy, determination. I feel like those things can really change the world. If everyone had a bit more care for one another, if everyone wanted to connect with people, and if people had more empathy, especially people in charge, that would change so much.
Well, let's take over then, guys.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
From the inside, though, I've got no interest in certain ways of doing things. But yeah, like, again, the power of everybody. Love it.
Yeah.
There's one last question that we could ask. And when you feel disconnected or like you're losing that hope what do you head back to? Is there a creative process, or is there people in your life? What do you do to then reconnect to that hope and put you back on that path of hopefulness and working towards a better future?
I think it's a combination of going inwards and looking outwards at the same time. Because I think when you go inwards, you connect to that inner source of hope. And also, again, going back to thinking about the past and the fact that you are part of this ecosystem of lots of people who are working towards the same thing. But then community is so important. For me, friendships are like life affirming in terms of bringing me back or grounding me. People who understand, people who get it, those, even it can just be the smallest conversations. And that to me is it's connection. So I think connection to yourself and who you are and your essence and remembering that. And then connection to people around you in your life who understand.
It reminds me of the quote. It actually really resonated. It said, loneliness is as much about being disconnected from yourself as it is to other people. And I think sometimes it's like, yeah, I just feel really lonely because I'm not around others. And actually, if I look at a lot of people who've really gone through deep, desperate loneliness, I'm just not 100% sure you really know who you are. And so how do you show up and connect with other people if you haven't worked that bit out? And it's not easy. Like, you need both to truly feel part of it.
Definitely. I think that's also where collective creativity comes into it as well. And that's what I love about facilitating those spaces, is that I think especially with art making collectively, it's a way that you're connecting to yourself, but around other people and with other people under a certain theme or under a certain like identity. And I think that is a way to access both those sides.
And for anyone listening who is in a particular spot where they feel a bit disconnected, are there any tools or techniques or an exercise you found helpful connecting back to yourself?
Yeah, a combination of things. Sometimes it's just about giving yourself the love and care that you deserve, and that's everything. That's a lot. Sometimes that can be going and talking to a tree. That's something that I do. Going back to the thing about like queerness and nature, there was a time where I was feeling so disconnected and unseen and misunderstood by by the world and everything. I literally was just walking and I went to a tree and I was like, wow, you're so grounded and rooted and you don't care. You're just growing however big you want to grow, and you've rooted yourself into the ground. You're ancient. You've been here for so long. And that gave me so much solace. And I was like, yes, so has my community as well. And I can be more like you. I want some of this energy right now, this ancient, grounded, rooted energy that's constantly growing and constantly will grow. So yeah, I guess talk to trees.
Oh, I love that. It's so, well, you're such a wonderful person and the world needs
Thank
you and
you.
more people like you. So thank you so, so much for taking the time. It's been a real honor.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. It's been, so nice speaking to you both. And I love everything that you're doing with the Library of Hope. So yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast.
And if there's anything you need from us, let us know. We are here.
Oh,
I've appointed us part of your community. I hope that's okay.
love it. Yes.
I need some superhero earrings.
Yeah, magic junkers. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
See you later.
After talking with Aaran, we realised that hope isn't some far-off idea. It's in the everyday, in the way communities hold each other, in friendships, in the creative spaces people build for themselves. For Aaran, dreaming is urgent and collective. It's how pain can turn into power and how joy and connection keep going even when everything around us feels very overwhelming. Because in a world built to divide us, every act of connection is resistance, and that is where hope really lives. Thanks for listening to the Hopecast, a podcast by Library of Hope. If you want to explore more stories of imagined futures, visit libraryofhope.world. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you're joining us from. We'll be back with more conversations soon. Thanks again to our guest and to you for tuning in. Stay hopeful, stay curious.